The story begins in the heart of Eastern Europe, in a land where folklore bleeds into daily life, and where the forests themselves seem to whisper forgotten secrets. In the Romanian countryside of 1895, amidst rolling hills and shadowed valleys, there stood a manor unlike any other. Not for its beauty, nor for its wealth, but for something far more unsettling. This was a house that, according to those who lived in its shadow, simply refused to die. 4 generations, the people of the surrounding villages told stories about this place. They spoke in hushed tones of the towering structure that loomed on the horizon, its silhouette cutting against the pale moonlight. It was a manor said to be cursed, a place where misfortune lingered like fog, where death and disaster clung to its walls. And yet, no matter how much the people feared it, the building remained, unyielding, unmoved, as though time itself bent around it. Fires were set, walls were torn down, and yet the manor stood. Every attempt to rid the earth of its presence ended the same way, in failure, in tragedy, in mystery. But this was not just a tale whispered by peasants to frighten children into obedience. The story of this Romanian manor was documented, investigated, and even debated by officials, priests, and scholars of the age. Why would a simple structure inspire such dread? Why did so many risk their lives to bring it down, only to find themselves overcome by disaster? Was it truly indestructible? Or was it the human imagination, sharpened by superstition, that created the illusion of a house too strong to die? The year 1895 marked a turning point. By then, the manor had already become infamous, its reputation spreading beyond its rural origins. That year, attempts were made, serious, deliberate attempts, to erase it from existence. Local authorities, pressured by the cries of terrified villagers, ordered that the building be destroyed. The people believed the land itself was poisoned by its presence, and that only by purging the manor could their community be free of the strange accidents, sudden illnesses, and unexplainable misfortunes that seemed to radiate from its walls. Yet when the tools of man were brought against it, fire, hammer, and even explosive charge, the manor stood, defiant and mocking. Those who worked on the task often paid dearly, stricken by accidents so bizarre they became the subject of whispered legend. This documentary seeks to uncover what truly happened in Romania during those unsettling years, to peel back the layers of folklore, superstition, and half-remembered accounts, and reveal the story of the house that would not die. Was it merely the stubborn endurance of stone and timber, or was something darker at play? Could it have been the site of unholy rituals, its foundations steeped in blood, granting it a form of immortality? Or perhaps the secret lay not in superstition but in science, an ingenious architectural design or a quirk of geology that made destruction near impossible. As we journey into this mystery, we must first remember the context of its time. Romania, in the closing years of the 19th century, was a nation balanced precariously between tradition and modernity. In the cities, trains, and telegraphs heralded a new age of progress, but in the countryside, belief in curses, witches, and restless spirits was still strong. It was in this liminal space that the manor's legend took root and flourished. For the villagers who lived under its shadow, it was not just a house. It was alive. It breathed, it hungered, it resisted. To them, it was as much a creature as it was a building. And so, we begin with a mystery, a house said to be immortal, a manor that fire could not consume, that walls refused to crumble, that history could not erase. As we unravel its tale, we will step into a world where the boundary between the rational and the irrational blurs, where human fear amplifies natural phenomena, and where the truth may be far more unsettling than fiction. This is not simply the story of bricks and mortar. It is the story of a community haunted, of generations who could not escape its presence, of countless attempts to sever its existence from the land only to fail again and again. To this day, it stands as a reminder of how legends are born, how they endure, and how sometimes, no matter how much we seek to destroy the past, it refuses to die. This is the tale of the Romanian manor that would not fall. A house caught between myth and reality, between history and horror. And before we can attempt to explain its mystery, we must first walk through its history, to see where its story began, and why it still lingers in the shadows of our imagination. In the late 19th century, Romania was a land suspended between the old and the new, a country where centuries-old superstitions collided with the stirrings of modern industry. Cities like Bucharest and Iași were beginning to feel the pulse of change. Gas lamps illuminated cobblestone streets, trains carried passengers at unprecedented speeds, and telegraph lines stitched the nation together with invisible threads of communication. Yet in the rural corners of the country, where the manor stood, life remained stubbornly tied to tradition. Villagers worked the land as their ancestors had, told stories that had passed from one generation to the next, and regarded the world with a mixture of fear and reverence. It was in this liminal space, caught between modernity and folklore, that the legend of the manor began to take shape. To an outsider, Romania might have appeared picturesque, its rolling hills, thick forests, and rivers cutting through the countryside. But for the villagers living under the shadow of the manor, the land was alive with unseen forces. Every dense forest was home to spirits and witches. Every quiet village lane could conceal a lurking vampire or a cursed soul. In this world, a manor that resisted destruction was not merely a curiosity, it was a tangible threat. Its mere presence was enough to unsettle the villagers, to make mothers clutch their children tighter at night, and to make laborers hesitant to approach its gates. The cultural tension of the time only amplified the manor's infamy. On one hand, scientific rationalism was beginning to take root. Newspapers published articles about engineering feats and natural phenomena, while universities encouraged young Romanians to study the laws of physics, chemistry, and architecture. On the other hand, superstition and oral tradition were deeply entrenched in rural life. This created a paradox, a country eager to embrace the logic of the modern age, yet unable to abandon the narratives of the supernatural. Within this framework, a story like that of the manor could spread quickly, moving seamlessly between folklore and documented history. Romanians of the countryside often lived in a world where death and misfortune were explained not merely by natural causes, but by forces beyond comprehension. Diseases were sometimes attributed to curses, accidents to malevolent spirits, and misfortune to ill omens. Against this backdrop, the manor's reputation as an indestructible house fed directly into these beliefs. The villagers interpreted the repeated failures to destroy it as proof of a supernatural force at work. Even local priests, whose authority was immense in these rural communities, sometimes admitted unease when confronted with reports of the manor's strange resilience. The manor's location itself played a role in shaping the narrative. Nestled on a hill surrounded by thick woods, it was both visible and isolated. Travelers approaching from miles away would first see its silhouette rising against the sky, a dark, imposing shape that seemed to defy the surrounding landscape. Seasonal fog often enveloped the hilltop, giving the impression that the building emerged from the mist like a phantom. It was a setting perfectly suited for fear, perfectly suited for legend. And yet, while the landscape contributed to its eerie reputation, the manor's very endurance ensured that it became something more than scenery. It became a character in its own right, a persistent, silent, and terrifying witness to history. At the same time, Romania's political and social landscape contributed to the sense of uncertainty surrounding such sites. The late 19th century was a period of nation-building, with tensions between local traditions and central authority. Landowners wielded immense power, and villagers often relied on them for protection, employment, and guidance. When a manor was rumoured to be cursed or alive with danger, it was not just a personal concern. It threatened the social and economic stability of the entire community. Local officials sometimes attempted to intervene, yet the manor's persistence, coupled with inexplicable accidents among those who tried to demolish or inhabit it, made such interventions fraught with risk. The convergence of these factors, geography, superstition, and societal tension, created fertile ground for the manor's legend to thrive. People did not simply fear the house because it was old. They feared it because it existed in a world already steeped in uncertainty and mystery. Its defiance of destruction resonated deeply with a population accustomed to explaining life's chaos through stories of the supernatural. In the minds of villagers, scholars, and eventually investigators, the manor was more than stone and timber. It was an enigma, a challenge to both faith and reason. And so, as we turn our gaze to the manor itself, it is essential to understand this context. The world in which it existed was one in which science and superstition shared uneasy coexistence, a world where a mysterious building could capture imaginations and dominate daily life. The manor was not merely a house. It was a mirror reflecting the anxieties, beliefs, and hopes of a society on the threshold of modernity. To comprehend why it refused to die, we must first step into that world, to walk among the villagers, to hear their fears, and to feel the weight of a history where the rational and the irrational were forever intertwined. Here, in the shadowed hills of 1895 Romania, the stage was set. The manor waited, silent and imposing, ready to reveal a story that would span generations, defy logic, and challenge our understanding of what it truly means for a house to refuse death. The origins of the manor are shrouded in as much mystery as the building itself. Records suggest that construction began in the early 1800s, commissioned by a wealthy aristocratic family whose lineage was as influential as it was enigmatic. Some historians trace the family back to minor nobility in the Carpathian region, though much of their history is fragmented, scattered across church registries, tax records, and personal correspondences. Even these sources hint at a family whose reputation was steeped in secrecy and eccentricity, a lineage that seemed to court both admiration and suspicion. From the beginning, the manor was unlike typical rural estates. Its architecture was unusual, imposing stone walls, narrow Gothic windows, and towers that reached into the sky like fingers clawing at the heavens. Inside, the rooms were labyrinthine, with hidden passageways, vaulted ceilings, and walls lined with intricate carvings whose meaning was long forgotten. Local artisans who worked on the building reportedly vanished without explanation, though some accounts suggest they left due to fear rather than misfortune. These peculiarities fueled early rumors that the manor was designed with purposes beyond simple habitation, that it was a repository of secrets, a vault of occult knowledge, or even a site for rituals that crossed the boundary between the living and the dead. The aristocratic family that inhabited the manor was equally enigmatic. Known for their wealth and influence, they maintained strict privacy, rarely entertaining outsiders and often leaving villagers to wonder about their affairs. Letters and diaries from the era reveal a family obsessed with legacy, control, and preservation. One recurring motif is the emphasis on permanence, ensuring the estate would survive generations. Some historians argue that this obsession explains the manor's unusually robust construction, while others suggest more sinister interpretations, hinting at ritualistic or alchemical motivations behind its design. Local legends also tell of the family's unusual practices. Villagers whispered about late-night ceremonies in the manor's towers, strange lights that flickered in the windows after midnight, and sounds that echoed across the valley, voices that were neither human nor animal. Some accounts claim that livestock avoided the manor's grounds entirely, refusing to graze nearby or even cross its threshold. The family's reticence, combined with these inexplicable phenomena, only deepened the sense of unease surrounding the estate. To the villagers, the manor seemed alive, aware, and perhaps even hostile. The manor's physical construction reflected both wealth and obsession with durability. Stones quarried from nearby mountains were carefully selected for strength, and the foundations were laid in a manner that suggested the builders intended the structure to endure centuries. The walls were thick, reinforced with hidden beams, and the floors were crafted from dense oak, resistant to both fire and rot. Even by modern standards, these materials and techniques were exceptional, hinting at both ingenuity and an almost obsessive determination to create a lasting monument. Some engineers later speculated that this exceptional construction may explain why multiple attempts to demolish the manor ended in failure. However, even these rational explanations struggle to account for the combination of accidents, illnesses, and tragedies that seem to follow those who worked on or near the estate. Another layer of mystery lies in the manor's location. It was deliberately situated on a hilltop, overlooking a network of small villages, forests, and rivers. This vantage point offered strategic advantages, but it also created an aura of isolation. The manor dominated the landscape, visible from miles away, yet seemingly detached from the surrounding world. Travelers reported a sense of unease as they approached, often describing the manor as watching them, as if it had awareness of their intentions. Such psychological impressions, whether real or imagined, reinforced the idea that the house itself possessed a presence beyond mere bricks and mortar. Historical documents hint at the manor's use beyond ordinary domestic life. Some letters suggest the family kept extensive collections of books, artifacts, and manuscripts that were considered esoteric or forbidden. There are references to experiments, scientific, alchemical, or possibly ritualistic, that were conducted within its walls. While these accounts are often fragmentary or secondhand, they contribute to the growing legend that the manor was more than a residence. It was a site of obsession, secrecy, and perhaps even danger. Villagers spoke of unexplained phenomena that predated the events of 1895, suggesting that the estate's reputation for resisting destruction was rooted in practices that had been ongoing for decades. As the manor's story spread, it began to attract attention beyond the immediate region. Local priests, magistrates, and eventually foreign travelers documented its oddities. Each account painted a picture of a house that was both remarkable in construction and terrifying in presence. Some observers focused on its architectural marvels, others were captivated by the sinister aura that seemed to permeate every stone and corridor. Over time, these narratives merged with folklore, creating a complex tapestry in which the manor existed simultaneously as a historical site, a legend, and a place of fear. By the mid-19th century, long before the infamous events of 1895, the manor had already earned a reputation as a house that could not be easily challenged. Fires, natural decay, and human intervention seemed unable to compromise its structure. Its endurance was remarkable, but the manor's mysteries went beyond physical resilience. Accounts of sudden illnesses, accidents, and unexplained deaths hinted at forces that could not be explained by architecture alone. The combination of skillful construction, isolated location, and an aristocratic family steeped in secrecy laid the groundwork for what would later become one of the most chilling and enduring legends in Romanian history. Thus, the manor's origins are inseparable from its mystique. It was conceived with purpose, crafted with precision, and surrounded by an air of secrecy that invited speculation and fear. Its walls were more than protection from the elements. They were a testament to the ambitions, obsessions, and perhaps the darker inclinations of those who built it. Understanding these origins is essential, for it is within these early foundations, both literal and metaphorical, that the story of a house refusing to die begins. Even before 1895, the manor had already begun to earn a reputation for misfortune. The earliest accounts speak of sudden deaths within the aristocratic family itself, mysterious illnesses, accidents, and tragedies that seemed to strike without warning. Villagers noted that every generation of the family endured untimely losses, and those who survived often emerged deeply changed, withdrawn, or haunted by inexplicable fears. To the superstitious minds of the local population, these events were not mere coincidences. They whispered that the house itself demanded a toll, that it collected the life force of those who dwelled within or dared to approach it. Among the first recorded incidents was the death of the manor's original steward, a man responsible for managing the estate's construction and early maintenance. Reports suggest he fell ill with a sudden fever that left him bedridden for weeks, despite the care of skilled physicians who had never before seen such a rapid decline. Some villagers claimed to have seen ghostly figures in the manor's windows on the nights preceding his death, while others swore that an unnatural chill would follow anyone who entered the estate after sunset. These accounts, whether true or exaggerated, reinforced the perception that something beyond human understanding permeated the manor's walls. Tragedy seemed to spread beyond the family itself. Farmhands and laborists who worked near the estate frequently reported accidents of bizarre and deadly nature. Tools would slip from hands with catastrophic results, animals would refuse to pass certain thresholds, and some workers were stricken by sudden collapses or unexplained illnesses. Villagers began to speak of the curse of the house, a malevolent force that punished those who attempted to interfere with its existence. Even neighboring estates began to heed warnings. People would alter their travel routes to avoid the manor, and some families forbade their children from entering the surrounding woods after dark. Clergy who visited the manor were not immune to the unsettling events. Priests attempting to bless the property or offer spiritual counsel sometimes reported feelings of dread, nausea, and sudden exhaustion. One account details a priest whose candle mysteriously extinguished multiple times in a single evening while he walked through the manor's hallways. Each time he relit it, a cold wind would sweep through, despite the lack of open windows. These incidents, documented in local parish records, blurred the line between folklore and observed phenomenon. The notion that the manor was protected, or perhaps empowered, by forces beyond the human realm became increasingly difficult to dismiss. As word of these deaths and accidents spread, the legend grew more elaborate. Villagers began to link each misfortune, connecting them across years and generations to form a narrative of inevitability. Families who had lived nearby for decades shared stories of the manor's watchful presence, describing how even animals seemed aware of a malevolent intelligence within its walls. Horses would shy away, dogs would howl, and birds would avoid the surrounding forests. It was as if the land itself had become imbued with the manor's will, creating a zone of unease that extended far beyond its physical boundaries. These early tragedies also laid the foundation for the belief in a curse tied directly to the manor's construction and the family that built it. Some claimed that the aristocrats had performed rituals to protect their lineage, inadvertently, or perhaps intentionally, imbuing the building with supernatural power. Others suggested that the manor's unusual architecture, with its hidden rooms and labyrinthine corridors, acted as a conduit for forces that were not meant to be understood. Whatever the cause, the result was the same, a community gripped by fear, with each new accident reinforcing the belief that the house demanded sacrifice. Despite, or perhaps because of, these ominous reports, curiosity about the manor grew. Travelers and scholars were drawn to the estate, eager to witness its strange aura firsthand. Their observations, however, often confirmed the villagers' fears. Many visitors described a sense of being watched, feelings of suffocating dread, or an overwhelming sense that the manor itself was alive. Some left the property in a state of panic, while others fell ill in the days following their visit. Over time, these accounts merged with the oral histories of locals, creating a tapestry of fear that extended far beyond the immediate community. The culmination of these early deaths and unexplained events was a pervasive sense that the manor existed outside the normal rules of the world. It became a symbol of the unknown, a tangible reminder that some forces could not be controlled, predicted, or destroyed. By the time serious attempts to demolish the house were proposed, the legend had already taken firm root. The villagers were not merely wary of the manor, they were convinced it was dangerous, perhaps even sentient. And the tragic history of the family and workers provided a chilling validation of their fears. As the 19th century drew to a close, the whispers of a curse intensified, growing louder with every inexplicable incident. The stage was set for 1895, a year that would see the first organized attempts to confront the manor's persistence. But before we reach that turning point, it is crucial to understand the foundation of fear that had already been built. The deaths, the illnesses, the accidents, all were pieces of a larger pattern that hinted at something beyond natural explanation. Whether it was truly a curse, the consequence of architectural brilliance, or simply the power of rumor and superstition, the manor had already established its reputation, a house that would not surrender to death, destruction, or human will. This legacy of early misfortune created a framework for every story, every legend, and every attempt to challenge the manor in the years that followed. It is within these chilling beginnings that the true enigma of the manor starts to take shape, a house that, from the very moment it existed, seemed determined to defy fate itself. The year 1895 marked a turning point in the history of the manor. By then, the building's reputation had grown beyond local superstition, reaching the ears of landowners, local authorities, and even curious travelers. Villagers, desperate to rid themselves of the ever-present shadow of the estate, petitioned for its destruction. They cited the countless tragedies, the mysterious illnesses, and the inexplicable accidents tied to the manor, claiming that the land itself had become poisoned by its presence. What followed were some of the most extraordinary and chilling attempts to dismantle a building in recorded history. The first effort involved a team of skilled laborists, brought in to methodically tear down the manor. According to contemporary accounts, the workers arrived with tools, wagons, and provisions, determined to complete their task. However, almost immediately, strange incidents began to occur. Tools slipped from hands in ways that defied logic, heavy beams fell without warning, narrowly missing the laborists. Some men fell ill with fevers so sudden and severe that they were carried from the site within days. Others disappeared entirely, vanishing from the village without a trace. Rumors spread that the house itself was fighting back, and soon many of the workers refused to continue. Local villagers watched from a distance, whispering that the manor had claimed new victims, just as it had generations of the family before. When the first attempt failed, a more drastic measure was taken. A controlled fire was set, intended to burn the building to the ground. Villagers gathered, some in hope, others in dread, expecting the manor to be reduced to smouldering ruins. But the fire behaved strangely. It consumed parts of the outer walls and the surrounding brush, yet the core structure remained largely untouched. Stones that should have cracked under heat stayed intact, wooden beams blackened but did not collapse, and the main hall remained eerily standing. Those who watched claimed that the flames themselves seemed to hesitate, flickering as if reluctant to touch the heart of the manor. Panic spread among the witnesses when the fire inexplicably died down despite high winds and abundant fuel. Once again, the manor endured, and its legend grew. Authorities, unwilling to accept failure, turned to explosives. Charges were placed strategically around the foundations and main walls, the plan being to bring down the entire structure in a single effort. On the day of detonation, villagers held their breath as officials ignited the fuses. The resulting explosion shook the ground, sent stones flying, and filled the air with dust and smoke. Yet when the cloud cleared, the manor still stood. Some walls were damaged, and parts of the roof were charred, but the core building remained unyielding. Even more disturbing were the accidents that followed. Several men involved in setting the charges fell seriously ill or suffered severe injuries under circumstances that could not be explained by the explosion alone. One laborer reportedly disappeared entirely after claiming he had seen a shadow move independently across the manor grounds. Eyewitness accounts from that year describe phenomena that defied reason. Flames leapt unnaturally, appearing to change direction mid-air. Hammers and axes struck nothing yet splintered. Heavy stones rolled uphill without assistance. Some villagers swore they heard voices emanating from inside the manor, chanting or crying in languages long forgotten. Others spoke of cold winds that cut through clothing in the middle of summer, or of strange lights that glimmered in windows that had no panes. While some of these reports may have been exaggeration or fear-driven imagination, the consistency across multiple accounts made the stories impossible to dismiss entirely. The manor's reputation was no longer just a local legend. It was a documented phenomenon attracting the attention of curious outsiders and even scientists. The manor's defiance did more than frustrate demolition attempts. It began to affect the surrounding community in tangible ways. Villagers reported a sudden increase in livestock deaths, crops failing inexplicably, and family illnesses coinciding with the destruction attempts. These events were interpreted as punishment for disturbing the manor. Local priests attempted blessings and exorcisms, but their efforts seemed powerless. Candles extinguished prematurely, holy water evaporated without contact, and the clergy themselves reported unexplainable sickness after visiting the manor. The pattern was clear. The house's influence extended beyond its walls, reaching into the lives of all who dared approach. Interestingly, not everyone interpreted the failures as supernatural. Engineers and scholars speculated that the manor's construction was simply extraordinary. The use of dense oak, unusually strong mortar, and an interlocking stone design may have made the structure nearly impervious to fire or explosives of the era. Yet even the most rational observers struggled to account for the sequence of accidents, illnesses, and sudden disappearances among those attempting destruction. When confronted with this combination of extraordinary resilience and coincidental tragedies, even skeptics could not ignore the manor's terrifying presence. By the end of 1895, the attempts to destroy the manor had failed spectacularly. The building stood as it had for decades, if not centuries, towering over the hilltop with an air of smug defiance. The villagers, who had once hoped for relief, were left with renewed fear and awe. They whispered that the manor was alive, that it fed on life and suffering, and that no human effort could challenge it. Letters and diaries from the period express a mixture of frustration, terror, and helplessness, documenting not just the technical failures but the psychological impact of confronting a structure that seemed to resist destruction. These events marked the beginning of the manor's true legend. It was no longer a story told in whispers by fearful villagers. It became a tale known across the region, attracting attention from journalists, historians, and eventually paranormal investigators. The year 1895 proved that the house would not die, not by fire, not by explosives, and not by human will. Its persistence challenged understanding, blurred the lines between reality and superstition, and ensured that the manor would remain a subject of fascination for generations to come. By the conclusion of these events, the manor was firmly established as a symbol of indestructibility and enigma. It was a building that refused to yield, a silent witness to human ambition and failure, and a terrifying reminder that some forces, whether natural, architectural, or supernatural, defy control. The attempts to destroy it in 1895 were only the beginning of a long history of confrontations, tragedies, and mysteries, one that would continue well into the 20th century and beyond, ensuring that the manor story would never fade from memory. The events of 1895 left an indelible mark on those who witnessed the manor's persistence firsthand. Survivors of the demolition attempts carried their experiences as both physical and psychological scars, and their accounts form one of the most chilling layers of the manor's legend. Villagers, laborious, and even clergy who entered the estate offered descriptions that blurred the line between reality and the supernatural, creating a tapestry of testimonies that would endure for generations. One of the earliest survivors, a laborer named Ion Popescu, recalled the night the first fire was set. He described walking through the manor's main hall as the flames consumed the exterior walls. Despite the intense heat and smoke, the center of the building remained cool and untouched. It was as if the house breathed around me, he later wrote. I could feel its eyes on me, waiting, patient, and alive. Ion survived that night, but he became withdrawn, rarely speaking and avoiding any conversation about the manor. Villagers later reported that he had begun seeing shadows moving independently of their sources, and that he suffered from sudden bouts of paralysis and fever, symptoms that doctors could not explain. Another testimony comes from Maria Ionescu, a local woman who worked as a cook for the aristocratic family. Maria claimed to have witnessed objects moving on their own during the demolition attempts. Plates flew from shelves, chairs tipped without being touched, and doors slammed shut repeatedly. She described hearing indistinct voices calling her name, sometimes in the manor's hallways, sometimes in the surrounding woods. "It was as if the house spoke to us," she said in a recorded interview decades later. Her account, corroborated by other villagers, added to the growing belief that the manor possessed a form of awareness, an intelligence that was impossible to comprehend. Priests who entered the manor also offered unsettling testimonies. Father Dumitrescu, who attempted to bless the estate in 1895, wrote in his diary about a sense of oppressive dread. Candles would extinguish inexplicably, and his prayers seemed to vanish into the walls. He reported hearing laughter when no one was present, and feeling sudden chills that left him shivering even in the heat of summer. Father Dumitrescu survived the encounter physically, but he later admitted that he had lost faith in his ability to influence the manor through spiritual means. His writings underscore the profound psychological impact of confronting a place where the familiar laws of the world no longer applied. Many of the surviving workers who participated in the demolition attempts spoke of inexplicable accidents. One man, Gheorghe, recounted a day when a large beam fell directly toward him but stopped mere inches from his body. He insisted he had not seen any obstruction or support, yet the beam hovered as if suspended by invisible hands. Another laborer, Nikolai, disappeared for several days during the initial demolition attempt. When he returned, he claimed to have wandered through hidden passages that led to rooms no one else knew existed. He described strange symbols etched into the walls and a cold presence that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Nikolai survived, but he reportedly never worked near the manor again. Local villagers added another layer to the testimonies. Many claimed to have witnessed unexplainable lights in the manor's windows, moving independently of candles or torches. Some described hearing cries or whispers echoing through the surrounding woods at night, while others saw figures walking along the roof, despite the fact that no one had been atop it for days. These accounts were consistent across decades, suggesting that the manor's eerie influence extended far beyond the individuals directly involved in demolition attempts. Even travelers and scholars who visited the estate were affected. A foreign architect, intrigued by reports of the manor's indestructibility, attempted to study its construction. He reported feeling an overwhelming sense of unease, as though unseen eyes were observing him constantly. Objects in his temporary lodgings were frequently displaced, and he experienced recurring nightmares of falling through floors that were solid and intact. Though he published his observations in a journal, he concluded that the manor was a phenomenon that defies logic, reason, and the comfort of ordinary experience. What emerges from these testimonies is a consistent pattern. Those who interacted closely with the manor experienced phenomena that challenged conventional understanding. Shadows moved without sources, objects defied gravity, voices echoed with no origin, and an oppressive presence seemed to dominate the space. While some have attempted to explain these experiences as hallucinations, fear-induced illusions, or the exaggeration of rumor, the sheer consistency of independent accounts lends credibility to the notion that something extraordinary was at play. The psychological toll on survivors was profound. Many suffered from anxiety, nightmares, and a pervasive sense of being watched long after leaving the manor. Some became reclusive, avoiding any discussion of the estate, while others documented their experiences meticulously, perhaps as a means of rationalizing the irrational. In either case, their stories reveal that the manor's influence extended beyond its physical boundaries, leaving an imprint on the minds and lives of those who came too close. The testimonies also serve another purpose. They bridge the gap between superstition and observation. While folklore provides the language and imagery of the curse, survivor accounts offer tangible details, specific events, precise locations, and chronological records that anchor the legend in reality. The combination of witness testimony and documented incidents forms a compelling argument that the manor was far more than an ordinary building. Its persistence, its influence, and its effect on human perception suggest a place that exists in the intersection of history, psychology, and perhaps something that cannot be fully explained. In the end, the survivors' accounts are among the most haunting elements of the manor's story. They remind us that the legend was not born solely of imagination or fear, but of lived experiences that defied expectation and reason. Each testimony adds weight to the enduring mystery, painting a picture of a house that not only stood firm against destruction but seemed to actively interact with those who sought to challenge it. Through these voices, we glimpse the full scope of the manor's presence, terrifying, unyielding, and inexplicably alive. The manor's indestructibility and the eerie events surrounding it naturally drew the attention of scholars, engineers, and scientists of the era. While villagers interpreted the house's resilience as proof of a curse or supernatural force, the growing interest of rational thinkers sparked a debate that would continue for decades. Was the manor's endurance a product of human ingenuity, geological anomaly, or something beyond comprehension? In exploring these questions, the story of the manor occupies a fascinating space between science and superstition. Engineers and architects who examined the building were struck by its extraordinary construction. The walls were crafted from unusually dense stones, quarried from nearby mountains, and fitted with precision that would rival modern masonry. Mortar composed of a unique mix of lime, clay, and unknown additives made the stonework exceptionally resistant to fire and erosion. The wooden beams were of old-growth oak, extraordinarily thick, and carefully interlocked to provide maximum stability. Some experts suggested that the house's structural design may have inadvertently created a form of self-reinforcing architecture, which allowed it to withstand fires, storms, and even minor explosions. To them, the manor's persistence was not supernatural. It was the result of meticulous planning and superior craftsmanship. Yet structural ingenuity alone could not explain the full scope of the phenomena reported. Eyewitness accounts consistently described accidents, illnesses, and disappearances that coincided with attempts to destroy the building. Skeptics argued that these events were the result of psychological stress, confirmation bias, and heightened fear among the workers. When people believe a place is cursed, the mind can manifest symptoms such as sudden fatigue, fainting, or even psychosomatic illness. Similarly, accidents, while tragic, could be attributed to human error, uneven terrain, or heavy labor. For rationalists, these interpretations offered plausible explanations for what had previously seemed unexplainable. Another scientific avenue of inquiry involved the geology of the manor's location. Some geologists noted that the hill on which the manor was built contained dense, compacted soil and underground rock formations that could provide an unusually stable foundation. Certain minerals present in the ground might have contributed to the building's resistance to fire or collapse, while natural airflow patterns could explain some of the reported cold drafts or wind phenomena. Additionally, local variations in magnetic or electromagnetic fields were speculated to affect compasses, instruments, and even human perception, potentially accounting for reports of disorientation, strange lights, or sensations of unease. In this view, the manor was a marvel of natural and architectural synergy rather than a supernatural entity. Despite these rational interpretations, the manor's legend persisted, fueled by the very human need to assign agency to the unexplained. Stories of curses, blood rituals, and malevolent intent circulated alongside scientific reports, creating a dual narrative. Folklore suggested that the family who built the manor had engaged in secretive rites designed to protect or empower the house, infusing the walls with a presence that repelled destruction. Some accounts described elaborate blood offerings, occult symbols hidden in the foundation, and nightly ceremonies in which the family sought to bind the manor to their lineage. Whether factual or fabricated, these tales provided a compelling explanation for the building's endurance, resonating strongly with communities steeped in superstition. The tension between science and superstition was also reflected in contemporary journalism. Newspapers of the era were filled with sensationalized accounts of the manor, often describing miraculous survival of walls against fire or explosive charges, or workers struck down by unseen forces. While some journalists attempted to approach the story with skepticism, balancing rational analysis with eyewitness testimony, many embraced the supernatural interpretation for its dramatic appeal. These reports spread the manor's legend beyond the local region, capturing the imagination of foreign travelers, scholars, and paranormal enthusiasts. The interplay between documented events and sensational storytelling ensured that the manor would be remembered as both a historical curiosity and a source of terror. Modern interpretations continue to wrestle with the same questions. Architectural historians emphasize the technical mastery evident in the manor's design, suggesting that its longevity could be attributed to careful planning, choice of materials, and knowledge of structural mechanics that was advanced for the period. Psychologists highlight the role of fear, expectation, and collective imagination, explaining how human perception can amplify ordinary events into seemingly supernatural experiences. Meanwhile, folklorists argue that the manor's reputation cannot be separated from the cultural context in which it existed, an environment in which belief in curses, spirits, and the power of the unknown was both pervasive and deeply ingrained. The coexistence of these perspectives, scientific, psychological, and folkloric, reveals a broader truth about human engagement with the unexplained. The manor resists a single explanation precisely because it operates at multiple levels simultaneously. Its architecture allows it to survive physical assaults, Its history and location create a psychological impact on those who approach it, and its legend ensures that every generation adds to the narrative, perpetuating the sense of mystery and dread. In this way, the manor becomes more than a building. It becomes a symbol of the tension between human reason and the unknown, a monument to the enduring power of fear and fascination. Even attempts to reconcile science with folklore highlight the manor's enigmatic nature. While structural analysis can explain why parts of the building remained intact, it cannot account for the consistency of reported phenomena across decades. Likewise, while superstition may amplify perception, it cannot fully explain the timing and severity of accidents or illnesses that befell those who tried to demolish the manor. The convergence of these factors, the physical, the psychological, and the cultural, creates a situation in which the line between rational explanation and supernatural interpretation becomes nearly impossible to define. Ultimately, the debate between science and superstition underscores the complexity of the manor's legacy. To dismiss it entirely as a product of human error or fear is to ignore the remarkable construction, the persistent survival of the building, and the accounts of countless witnesses. To accept the legend without scrutiny risks elevating folklore above observable reality. The manor exists in the tension between these extremes, a site where rational analysis, cultural belief, and human experience intersect in a story that continues to captivate and confound. In the end, the manor's story teaches an important lesson. Some mysteries resist resolution not because they are supernatural, but because they operate on multiple planes at once. Architecture, human psychology, cultural context, and historical accident intertwine to create phenomena that appear beyond explanation. The manor's endurance is a testament to this complex interplay, a reminder that even in an age of reason, some stories retain their power precisely because they defy a single interpretation. As the manor's legend spread across Romania and beyond, the stories began to take on a darker, more supernatural tone. Villagers and travelers alike spoke not only of its indestructibility but also of creatures and spirits that were said to inhabit the estate. Tales of vampires, witches, and restless spirits became intertwined with accounts of the manor itself, creating a mythology that blurred the line between architecture and the paranormal. By the late 19th century, the house was no longer just a physical structure. It had become a living symbol of fear and mystery, a place where folklore came to life. One of the earliest supernatural associations involved vampires, creatures long rooted in Romanian folklore. Some villagers claimed to have seen figures moving in the manor's windows at night, pale and silent, disappearing when approached. Others reported that livestock brought near the estate would die suddenly, their bodies drained of blood in a manner reminiscent of vampire attacks described in local legend. Stories circulated of family members who, after spending time in the manor, appeared sickly and lethargic, leading some to speculate that the house itself might harbor or attract vampiric forces. While these accounts cannot be verified scientifically, their consistency across multiple witnesses lent credibility to the notion that the manor was a magnet for the supernatural. Witches were another frequent element in the expanding folklore. The Carpathian region had long been steeped in tales of practitioners of dark magic, and many villagers believed that the manor's original family may have employed witchcraft to protect their estate. Accounts describe strange symbols etched into walls and floors, hidden rooms where incantations were allegedly performed, and artifacts with unknown purposes scattered throughout the building. These elements suggested to locals that the house was more than a home. It was a nexus of power, a place where the natural and supernatural converged. Some claimed to have witnessed figures in dark robes performing rituals in the dead of night, while others reported hearing chants or seeing flames that could not be explained by ordinary fires. Spirits, both benevolent and malevolent, were reported with alarming frequency. Witnesses spoke of ghostly figures wandering the hallways, sometimes mimicking the movements of the living or repeating sounds from long ago. Doors would open or close on their own, objects would move without explanation, and cold spots would appear abruptly, chilling anyone who passed through. A common thread in these accounts was the perception that the manor itself was sentient, reacting to the presence of visitors with either hostility or observation. The building seemed to hold a memory of every person who had ever entered, a cumulative consciousness that manifested through these spectral phenomena. The intertwining of folklore and physical reality reinforced the manor's terrifying reputation. Locals came to believe that any attempt to interfere with the house, whether through demolition, occupation, or even observation, would provoke its wrath. Reports of sudden illness, unexplained accidents, and strange disappearances were attributed not merely to bad luck but to the influence of the manor's supernatural inhabitants. Parents warned their children to avoid the estate at all costs, travelers changed their routes to skirt its grounds, and even officials approached the manor with caution, often seeking blessings from priests before setting foot on the property. Foreign visitors, drawn by curiosity or scholarly interest, contributed to the expanding legend. They recorded tales of strange lights in the windows, mysterious footprints in the gardens, and sounds that defied explanation. Some documented instances of shadowy figures observing them from hidden corners, while others described waking from nightmares in which the manor loomed larger than life, its towers stretching impossibly into the sky. These accounts, published in journals and newspapers, spread the manor's myth beyond local communities, ensuring that it would become a subject of fascination and fear across Europe. The fusion of folklore with historical events created a feedback loop that strengthened the legend. Each unexplained death, accident, or structural anomaly became proof of supernatural influence. Villagers' stories were passed down and embellished, shaping perceptions for future generations. Scholars and travelers, initially skeptical, often became convinced of the manor's strange powers after witnessing anomalies themselves. In this way, the supernatural narrative gained authority, merging with factual accounts to create a compelling and terrifying mythology. Interestingly, the manor's supernatural associations also reflected the cultural landscape of Romania at the time. Belief in vampires, witches, and restless spirits was widespread, and the manor's mysterious endurance fit neatly into these narratives. The building became a physical anchor for the fears and imagination of an entire region. Its towers, walls, and labyrinthine halls were no longer simply architectural features. They were symbols of power, malevolence, and the unknown. The supernatural elements of the story helped explain what could not be understood, providing a framework for interpreting the manor's resistance to destruction. Even today, the folklore surrounding the manor continues to captivate those interested in the macabre. Paranormal investigators, historians, and enthusiasts of Romanian legends have documented countless stories, ranging from the eerie to the inexplicable. While modern science offers rational explanations for many phenomena, optical illusions, structural anomalies, and psychological effects, the enduring appeal of the manor's legends lies in their emotional and cultural resonance. The house, it seems, thrives not only on physical survival but on the stories told about it, feeding its myth across generations. In conclusion, the expansion of folklore transformed the manor from a mysterious building into a symbol of supernatural power. Vampires, witches, and spirits became inseparable from its history, adding layers of fear, fascination, and intrigue. These stories, intertwined with documented events, created a legend that has persisted for over a century. The manor's indestructibility, combined with these supernatural associations, ensured that it would remain a subject of obsession, study, and dread. It became not merely a house, but a living narrative, one that continues to challenge the boundaries between reality and myth, history and horror. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the manor continued to defy both time and human interference. The events of 1895 had established its legend, but the following decades only deepened the aura of mystery surrounding the estate. New attempts to inhabit, modify, or destroy the building were met with the same inexplicable resistance, accidents, and tragedies as before, reinforcing the notion that the manor was impervious to human will. Each incident, whether documented in newspapers, letters, or local folklore, added another layer to a story that had already captivated generations. In the early 1900s, a new generation of landowners sought to reclaim the manor for practical purposes. They intended to modernize the estate, turning it into a working agricultural center with offices, stables, and housing for workers. Skilled engineers and laborists were brought in, confident that modern techniques and equipment would overcome any structural obstacles. However, within weeks of beginning renovations, the team encountered a series of inexplicable setbacks. Foundations that were supposed to be stable collapsed unexpectedly, tools malfunctioned in ways that defied explanation, and workers fell ill with sudden fevers or injuries that could not be accounted for by ordinary accident. One carpenter reportedly disappeared entirely, only to be found days later wandering the nearby forest, incoherent and frightened. The project was abandoned, and the manor stood as unyielding as ever. During this period, natural disasters seemed to target the manor with an unusual focus. Storms that destroyed nearby buildings appeared to spare the estate, leaving it almost untouched while lesser structures crumbled. Floods bypassed its foundations, and lightning struck the surrounding hills without ever hitting the manor itself. To engineers, these occurrences could be seen as coincidence, yet for locals, the pattern was unmistakable. The house seemed protected by an invisible force, impervious not only to human efforts but also to the unpredictable violence of nature. Tales circulated of winds that howled around the estate but never breached its walls, or of fires that raged through neighboring forests but stopped just short of the property line. These patterns further cemented the perception that the manor was alive and aware, responding to threats with a will of its own. The manor also drew attention from scholars and explorers intrigued by the events of 1895. Foreign visitors arrived to study its architecture, investigate its folklore, and document its anomalies. Many reported personal experiences that echoed those of earlier generations: disembodied voices, sudden chills, and objects moving without explanation. One visiting architect described walking through a corridor and feeling an invisible pressure that seemed to push him back, only to find no structural or natural explanation for the sensation. Another observer claimed that doors would open and close of their own accord, and that shadows appeared to shift independently of any light source. These accounts, combined with reports from local witnesses, made the manor a subject of fascination across Europe. Not all 20th century incidents were rooted in the attempts to renovate or inhabit the manor. Some involved trespassers or curious thrill-seekers who ventured onto the property. In several cases, individuals vanished for days, only to return with stories of hidden passageways, rooms that seemed larger than physically possible, and glimpses of figures in the shadows. Others claimed to have encountered phenomena that defied both logic and the laws of physics: windows opening into empty space, stairs that twisted unnaturally, and sounds echoing from walls with no cavities. Such testimonies reinforced the manor's reputation as a place where reality itself was malleable, bending to the will of the building or some unseen force. Medical and psychological anomalies also persisted during this period. Laborious, visitors, and even local officials frequently reported sudden illness, disorientation, or extreme fatigue when spending extended time on the property. Some developed chronic conditions that doctors of the era could not diagnose, while others experienced vivid hallucinations or recurring nightmares related to the manor. Scholars examining these cases noted the pattern but were unable to identify a physiological cause. For villagers steeped in superstition, these events confirmed the manor's supernatural influence. For rationalists, they remained a baffling anomaly, resistant to empirical explanation. World events did little to diminish the manor's presence. Even during periods of social upheaval, such as World War I and the subsequent political changes in Romania, the building survived intact. Neighboring estates fell to neglect, fire, or destruction, yet the manor remained, standing silent as ever, a sentinel against the passage of time. Reports from soldiers, refugees, and travelers during these tumultuous years added new stories of eerie lights, shadowy figures, and unexplained phenomena. In some accounts, the manor was described as watching intruders, its windows glowing faintly in the dark while no one was present. These narratives reinforce the perception that the estate existed outside the normal rules of time, geography, and human influence. By mid-century, the manor had achieved a near-mythical status. Folklore, eyewitness accounts, and partial documentation had merged into a legend that was both terrifying and irresistible. Scholars debated whether the house's indestructibility was due to construction, geography, psychological influence, or something truly supernatural. Paranormal enthusiasts began visiting, often leaving detailed records of what they perceived as unexplainable phenomena. These included sudden temperature drops, strange noises, movements of objects, and glimpses of spectral figures. Even when physical evidence could not substantiate the reports, the consistency of accounts over decades lent them a haunting credibility. Throughout the 20th century, the manor resisted all attempts at explanation and intervention. Every effort to alter, demolish, or exploit it failed spectacularly, often accompanied by incidents that reinforced fear and awe. Its endurance became emblematic of the intersection between history, architecture, and legend, a place where human ambition collided with forces that could not be comprehended. The manor's story transcended mere physical survival. It became a living narrative, growing with each generation that encountered it, weaving new layers of terror, fascination, and mystery. In conclusion, the 20th century proved that the manor was far more than a stubborn building. It was a phenomenon, a confluence of architecture, history, and folklore that resisted destruction and inspired fear. Later attempts to occupy, renovate, or document it only added to the growing legend, reinforcing the perception that the estate was a place where normal rules of reality did not apply. The manor had survived fires, explosives, neglect, and the upheavals of time, and its presence continued to challenge understanding, curiosity, and courage. By the century's end, the house was no longer merely a local legend. It was a symbol of enduring mystery, a structure that refused death and demanded recognition as something truly extraordinary. As the 20th century drew to a close, the manor had become a focal point for both historical research and paranormal investigation. Scholars, architects, and enthusiasts of the unexplained converged on the estate, eager to document, measure, and understand a place that had defied both destruction and explanation for over a century. Unlike the laborious, villagers, and officials of earlier generations, these modern investigators had access to scientific instruments, cameras, and recording devices. Yet even with these tools, the manor continued to resist comprehension, challenging both reason and empirical methodology. Early investigations in the 1980s and 1990s were often conducted by amateur paranormal groups. Armed with thermometers, EMF meters, and audio recorders, they sought evidence of supernatural activity. Many reported consistent anomalies, sudden temperature drops in certain rooms, unexplained sounds echoing through empty corridors, and objects moving without visible cause. Some captured photographs showing shadows or figures that could not be attributed to light or reflection. While skeptics dismissed these results as optical illusions or the product of heightened expectation, the sheer volume of consistent reports made it difficult to ignore the phenomena entirely. Scientific researchers approached the manor from a different angle. Architectural historians examined the building's construction, confirming the remarkable craftsmanship that had allowed it to withstand fires, storms, and minor explosives. Structural engineers noted the dense stonework, carefully interlocked beams, and precise foundation that gave the manor extraordinary resilience. Yet even these experts admitted that the scale of its survival exceeded ordinary explanation. The combination of technical brilliance, environmental factors, and repeated failures of demolition created an anomaly that blurred the line between structural engineering and something more inexplicable. Psychologists and sociologists also took an interest in the manor. They studied both the historical accounts and the experiences of modern visitors, seeking to understand how perception, fear, and suggestion might shape reports of paranormal phenomena. In controlled studies, visitors often experienced heightened anxiety, feelings of being watched, and unexplained physiological reactions while inside the manor. While these effects could be partially explained by expectation and environmental cues, narrow hallways, dim lighting, and creaking wood, they could not fully account for consistent, repeated reports across decades and independent observers. The manor seemed to possess a psychological impact that transcended rational explanation. Modern technology further complicated the manor's study. Motion sensors, infrared cameras, and audio recording equipment often picked up events with no visible source. Doors appeared to open and close, objects shifted slightly, and lights flickered despite stable electrical systems. Some investigators recorded what appeared to be faint voices, though verification proved impossible. Skeptics argued that equipment malfunctions, drafts, or mechanical faults were to blame, yet investigators familiar with the manor insisted that these anomalies often coincided with locations and events described in historical accounts. The estate had become a living laboratory, where science, folklore, and human experience intersected in ways that resisted simple classification. Interestingly, modern investigations revealed new layers of the manor's historical and cultural significance. Researchers uncovered forgotten rooms, hidden passageways, and structural quirks that suggested the original builders had intentionally designed the estate to confuse, conceal, or even intimidate. Some hidden spaces contained old symbols, inscriptions, and objects that hinted at ritualistic practices or obscure beliefs. While these findings could be interpreted in purely historical or architectural terms, they also fed the broader legend, reinforcing the notion that the manor's persistence was intertwined with human intention and perhaps something more elusive. International attention grew as stories of modern investigations circulated. Paranormal enthusiasts, historians, and tourists traveled from across Europe and beyond to witness the manor firsthand. Many returned with accounts echoing those of villagers and laborists from centuries earlier. Sudden chills, eerie sounds, shadowy movements, and an overwhelming sense of being observed. For some, these experiences were thrilling, a confirmation of the manor's supernatural reputation. For others, they were terrifying, a reminder that the house had never lost its power over those who dared to enter. Academics debated the implications of these findings. Some argued that the manor represented a rare convergence of extraordinary architecture, environmental conditions, and psychological influence, a unique but ultimately explainable phenomenon. Others suggested that it could not be fully understood through conventional scientific methods, implying that the estate operated on a level beyond ordinary human perception. This tension between rational analysis and experimental reality is central to the Manor's enduring fascination. It is simultaneously knowable and unknowable, concrete and ethereal. Modern paranormal studies also attempted to map patterns of activity within the Manor. Investigators documented hotspots where anomalies were most frequent: hidden corridors, tower rooms, and old foundations. They noted recurring phenomena, such as unexplained cold drafts, fleeting shadows, and electrical disturbances. While some of these could be linked to structural or environmental factors, the correlation with historical accounts suggested a continuity that transcended time. The Manor, it seemed, retained a memory of past events, a ghostly imprint woven into its very walls. Ultimately, modern investigations have added depth to the Manor's legend without dispelling it. Scientific analysis confirms the exceptional construction, while psychological and environmental studies offer partial explanations for some phenomena. Yet despite these tools, the Manor continues to defy complete understanding. It remains a place where the boundaries between the natural and supernatural, history and myth, observation and experience, blur into one continuous narrative. In conclusion, contemporary study of the Manor demonstrates that its power lies not merely in its physical resilience but in the cumulative effect of centuries of mystery, fear, and observation. Every visitor, investigator, and researcher contributes to a story that refuses to end. The house that resisted fire, explosives, and time now resists explanation, a testament to the enduring allure of the unexplained. Modern technology, historical research, and paranormal studies have illuminated aspects of the Manor, yet its full truth remains elusive, ensuring that it will continue to captivate, terrify, and intrigue future generations. The Manor's story, spanning over a century, has left an indelible mark not only on the local landscape but on Romanian culture and the broader imagination of those who study the macabre and the mysterious. By the mid-20th century, the estate had become more than a building. It had evolved into a symbol of enduring mystery, a place where history, folklore, and legend intersected with human curiosity and fear. Its cultural impact extends far beyond its walls, influencing literature, film, tourism, and even psychological study. One of the most significant aspects of the Manor's legacy is its influence on folklore and storytelling. Across villages in Romania, tales of the indestructible house, haunted corridors, and supernatural inhabitants became central to local oral traditions. Children were warned not to approach its grounds, travelers were cautioned against venturing near, and families recounted stories of unexplained deaths or vanishings tied to the estate. These narratives, passed down over generations, preserved the Manor's story even as the physical structure endured the passage of time. The repetition of these stories, often told in hushed tones around fires or in communal gatherings, solidified the house's reputation as an almost living entity, a place of terror and fascination. Writers and journalists also drew inspiration from the Manor. Articles and books chronicled its defiance of demolition, its mysterious phenomena, and the eerie experiences of those who encountered it. Early 20th century newspapers featured sensationalized accounts, blending factual reporting with elements of supernatural speculation. Authors of Gothic fiction found in the Manor a perfect muse, incorporating its eerie aura into novels, short stories, and plays. Its towers, hidden corridors, and ghostly reputation provided a fertile ground for exploring themes of fear, mortality, and the unknown. The Manor became a cultural touchstone, a recognizable reference in discussions of haunted houses and cursed estates throughout Europe. The Manor also influenced local and international perceptions of Romania's supernatural landscape. Romania, already famous for its vampire folklore, found in the Manor a tangible anchor for its legends. Scholars of folklore often cited it as a case study of how architecture, history, and cultural beliefs intertwine to create enduring myths. Tourists and paranormal enthusiasts from across the continent sought to witness the Manor firsthand, drawn by tales of its indestructibility and supernatural phenomena. These visitors helped embed the Manor within the broader narrative of Eastern European mystique, contributing to Romania's reputation as a land where the past and the supernatural coexist in uncanny ways. Psychologists and sociologists have studied the Manor as a phenomenon that demonstrates the intersection of fear, belief, and experience. The consistent reports of shadowy figures, sudden illnesses, and disorientation highlight how cultural expectations can shape perception and memory. Visitors, aware of the Manor's reputation, often experienced heightened anxiety, which could manifest physically and psychologically. Researchers suggest that these effects are compounded by environmental cues, the labyrinthine architecture, hidden passageways, and dimly lit corridors, creating an atmosphere that amplifies the mind's response to the unknown. In this way, the manor serves as both a physical and psychological case study, illustrating the enduring power of place-based fear. In contemporary times, the manor has also become a point of interest for paranormal research and tourism. Documentaries, YouTube videos, and investigative shows have featured the estate, examining both historical events and modern phenomena. These productions often emphasize the manor's indestructibility, the mysterious incidents documented over decades, and the cultural context that gave rise to its supernatural reputation. Social media and online forums allow enthusiasts from around the world to share experiences, theories, and stories, further extending the manor's influence and keeping its legend alive in popular consciousness. The manor's architectural significance adds another layer to its legacy. Scholars studying historical building techniques often reference the estate as an example of advanced masonry, ingenious use of materials, and strategic architectural planning. Its ability to survive natural disasters, fires, and human attempts at demolition has made it a subject of academic interest, demonstrating a level of skill and foresight uncommon in constructions of the period. Even as folklore and legend dominate the narrative, the technical mastery behind the building cannot be overlooked, bridging the gap between tangible human achievement and intangible mystery. Culturally, the manor has become a symbol of resistance, not merely resistance to physical destruction but to the erosion of memory, history, and myth. While neighboring estates fell to neglect or modernization, the manor persisted, retaining its identity as both a physical structure and a narrative force. It embodies the enduring power of stories to shape perception, influence behavior, and captivate the imagination across generations. By surviving intact, it allows each new observer, scholar, or visitor to participate in its story, ensuring that the legend evolves while remaining rooted in tangible reality. The impact on literature and media cannot be overstated. Gothic writers, horror novelists, and filmmakers have drawn inspiration from the manor's persistent mystery. Its indestructible walls, hidden rooms, and reputation for supernatural events offer a template for storytelling that combines fear, curiosity, and historical depth. Even in modern horror media, elements reminiscent of the manor, houses that resist destruction, locations imbued with malevolent presence, and unexplained phenomena, echo its influence. The manor is thus both subject and muse, an enduring presence in the cultural imagination. Finally, the manor's legacy is a testament to the interplay between reality and myth. Its survival, architectural ingenuity, and historical documentation provide tangible evidence of its existence, while folklore, survivor accounts, and modern investigations imbue it with layers of mystery. The manor exemplifies how stories, experiences, and cultural beliefs can converge to create an enduring legend that continues to captivate, terrify, and inspire. It is a reminder that certain places transcend their physical form, becoming symbols of mystery, resilience, and the unknown. In conclusion, the manor's legacy is multifaceted: a historical artifact, a psychological case study, a source of folklore, a cultural symbol, and a muse for creative works. It stands as a unique intersection of history, architecture, and mythology, a structure that refuses to die in any sense, be it physical, cultural, or imaginative. Its impact is not limited to those who have touched its walls but extends to every person who encounters its story, ensuring that the manor's presence persists across time and memory. The estate is no longer merely a location. It is a narrative, a legend, and a symbol of the enduring allure of the unexplained.